It only takes seconds to disappear. That's what they said about Dylan Ehler. A bright, happy 3-year-old playing in his grandmother's backyard, vanishing without a sound, without a struggle, and without a trace. Just 2 tiny rubber boots left behind, facing the water like a cruel farewell. But what really happened that day in Truro, Nova Scotia? Was it a tragic accident, or something far more unsettling? This is not just the story of a missing boy. It's the story of a family torn apart, a town haunted by silence, and a search for truth that refuses to fade. If you're drawn to real-life mysteries, unresolved disappearances, and the chilling unknown, you're in the right place. Make sure to subscribe to True Crimes now and turn on notifications. Now, let's begin. It was supposed to be just another quiet afternoon in the small town of Truro, Nova Scotia. May 6, 2020. The air was brisk, the sky overcast. And in a modest residential neighborhood, just a few blocks from Leopard Brook, a 3-year-old boy named Dylan Ehler vanished, without a sound, without a trace. And what was left behind were just his tiny rubber boots. Wet. Abandoned. Facing downstream. This is the story of what happened that day. The heartbreak that followed. And the questions that refused to die. Truro is the kind of town people don't expect horror from. With its tree-lined streets and weather-worn homes, it has the gentle charm of a place where everyone knows each other, where secrets struggle to stay hidden. But sometimes, the real horror isn't in what you see, it's in what's taken from you. On that Wednesday afternoon, Dylan's mother, Ashley Brown, dropped him off at her parents' house, something she'd done before. Dylan loved being with his grandparents. He loved running around in the backyard, pretending to chase monsters, wearing his little blue boots that squeaked when he ran. That day, he was with his grandmother, Dorothy Parsons. According to her, she let Dylan outside for just a moment. She turned her back, only to tie the family dog's leash. And by the time she turned around again, Dylan was gone. She called his name. Nothing. She searched the backyard. Empty. Panic settled in quick, cold, and paralyzing. Within minutes, the police were called. Within hours, the search was underway. But what they found was unsettling. Just 20 minutes after he disappeared, Dylan's boots were discovered submerged in the cold waters of Leopard Brook, a fast-moving stream that cuts through the town like a scar. The water level was high that week. Rushing. Unforgiving. The boots were found pointing downstream. And from that moment on, the town of Truro was split in two. There were those who believed Dylan had fallen into the brook and drowned, a tragic accident. And then, there were those who looked at the boots, the timeline, and the silence, and began to whisper. This wasn't an accident. This was something else. The search for Dylan escalated quickly. RCMP officers, diverse, search dogs, drones, thermal imaging, nothing was spared. But they found nothing. No body. No clothing. Not a trace. Just water. And silence. Dylan's parents, Ashley and Jason, were shattered. But confusion quickly turned into something darker. Why did it take so long for the search to start? Why weren't alerts issued immediately? Why did the boots seem so deliberately placed? Ashley began to replay everything in her head, every moment of that morning, every word she said to Dylan. She'd never imagined this would be the last time she heard him giggle. Jason became obsessed with the current of the brook. He studied maps, flood reports, rescue training manuals. Something wasn't right, he kept saying. If the current was strong enough to carry a boy, why weren't the boots swept away too? But it wasn't just the investigation that began to break them apart. It was the people. Within days, internet sleuths began tearing apart Ashley's life. Her old TikTok videos, jokes, lip syncs, bits of dark humor were dissected, misinterpreted, and weaponized. Some accused her of being involved. Others claimed she was too calm, too composed. The public became judge, jury, and executioner. Strangers sent her messages calling her a murderer. Photoshopped images of Dylan's face circulated online. Reddit threads exploded with conspiracy theories. Instead of helping find Dylan, the internet became a place to burn his mother at the stake. Grief became a battleground. And the people who needed comfort found themselves under siege. Ashley and Jason eventually filed court orders against some of the worst offenders. But the damage was done. And all the while, Dylan was still missing. Dylan's grandfather later recalled something chilling. A story from years before, about another child lost to that same brook. But that child's body had been found within days. Why not Dylan? Why nothing? And that question would come to haunt them all. It's been years now. The brook still runs. The boots are still kept in evidence. And Dylan remains a mystery. A name carved in memory but not yet in stone. Some believe he slipped. Some believe he was taken. Others whisper that what happened that day in Truro was something far more disturbing than anyone wants to admit. But one thing is certain. This story isn't over. Not yet. By the time search crews packed up their gear and went home, something else had already taken root, something invisible and relentless. Grief, of course, was the obvious presence. But what seeped deeper into Jason and Ashley's lives was something far colder. Uncertainty. Dylan's boots had been found in the stream behind the house, but that was all. No footprints. No signs of struggle. No body. Just a haunting silence where a child's laughter used to be. The police leaned toward an accidental drowning, a freak moment where a 3-year-old wandered off and slipped under the water. But nothing about it felt final. Nothing brought peace. And then came the whispers. At first, it was subtle. A strange look at the grocery store. A neighbor who suddenly stopped making eye contact. Then the messages started. Direct. Unfiltered. Accusatory. People they had never met, strangers from thousands of miles away, began posting about them, dissecting their every move, every word spoken to the press, every tear shed or not shed. Someone created a Facebook group. Then another. Then 10 more. The internet didn't offer sympathy. It offered suspicion. Jason's phone began vibrating late at night with anonymous texts. Accusations. Taunts. Questions laced with venom. Where did you really put him? One message asked. Another simply read, we know. Ashley was called a liar. A killer. A bad mother. People scrutinized the way she dressed during interviews, whether she wore makeup, how often she smiled. Every social media photo from before the disappearance was unearthed and used as supposed evidence of guilt. When she posted a picture of a haircut weeks after Dylan vanished, just one small act of self-care in the middle of spiraling grief, she was attacked online. How dare she smile? How dare she keep living? And it didn't stay online. One night, they came home to find a memorial they had built, Dylan's little boots hanging from a tree, surrounded by flowers and stuffed animals, had been torn apart. Someone had dug into the ground beneath it as if they were searching for something buried. It wasn't just cruel. It was invasive. It was madness. And yet, it continued. Even at the hospital, someone had accessed Dylan's medical records, and Ashley's. Illegally. Someone working inside had gone looking, maybe hoping to find some sinister detail to feed the rumors. They never found anything, of course. There was nothing to find. But the damage was done. Some nights, Jason sat alone in the living room, staring at the boots they'd brought home from the search. He'd hold them, rub the rubber soles like they could talk back, like maybe they remembered something he'd missed. He barely slept. Neither of them did. Ashley would wake screaming, convinced she'd heard Dylan's voice from the hallway. Other times she swore she saw him, darting around the corner, laughing, only to blink and be left with silence. They began to turn on themselves, not out of blame, but out of helplessness. Words turned sharp. Silence stretched too long. They didn't know how to comfort each other anymore. They were each drowning in the same storm, too lost to pull the other out. And through it all, the theories kept spreading. Some claimed Dylan had been kidnapped. That someone had been lurking just beyond the frame, watching and waiting. Others believed the dog had turned violent. More still spun wild tales involving cults and rituals. One self-proclaimed medium streamed a live video saying she had a vision of Dylan surrounded by dark figures, his voice calling from beneath the earth. Another claimed Dylan had been taken by a trafficking ring and that coded messages were hidden in news interviews. Jason tried not to read them. But late at night, with the house silent and his mind racing, he did. He read every word. Every wild claim. Every cruel joke. He once got a direct message from someone claiming to have Dylan, attaching a doctored photo of his face, bruised and bloody, with a fake ransom demand. It was a hoax. A sick joke. But Jason kept the photo anyway, just in case. Just in case it meant something. Just in case. Eventually, the harassment became too much. They filed a lawsuit against some of the people behind the online groups. It wasn't about revenge, it was survival. They had to draw a line, a boundary between grief and madness. They stood before a judge and tried to explain what it was like to lose your son and then be branded a murderer by strangers. But in truth, no courtroom could fix what was broken. There was no verdict that could bring peace. Because Dylan was still gone. And no one, not the police, not the so-called psychics, not the thousands of online sleuths, could tell them where he was. Some people still believe he fell into the brook and was carried away, his tiny body lost to the current. Others insist he was taken. That someone out there knows more than they're saying. That there was a flash of movement, a shadow on the edge of the frame, a door left open for too long. And then there are the parents. Still waking up each day with the same ache in their chest. Still wondering if they should keep looking or start grieving. Still waiting for that one call. That one sighting. That one impossible miracle. Dylan should be almost 9 now. Instead, the house remains filled with toys that no longer have a purpose. A bedroom that hasn't changed. A silence that refuses to leave. And the world? The world has moved on. But Jason and Ashley haven't. They can't. Because somewhere out there, maybe in a river, maybe in a stranger's home, maybe somewhere beyond the reach of reason, their son is waiting. In the story? It isn't over. Time moved forward, but not in the way it does for most families. For Jason and Ashley, each new season didn't bring closure, it brought distance. A widening gap between the moment Dylan vanished and the present. The air grew colder, then warm again, then cold once more. Years passed. The brook thawed and froze countless times, but never gave anything back. The posters still hung in the community at first, sun faded and wind-worn, pleading for sightings, for hope. Missing, Dylan Ehler. Age 3. Last seen wearing a camo jacket and rubber boots. Over time, some were taken down. Others were replaced by flyers for missing pets, local events, election ads. But not in the Ehler's home. Inside, Dylan's face remained everywhere. Photos on the fridge. Toys untouched. A baby monitor collecting dust. Ashley even kept his little toothbrush in its place, as if he might return one night and need it. But the silence was like a second death. Each year, on May 6th, they lit candles. Held tightly to one another. Waited for a sign. Sometimes, the night brought nothing. Other times, something strange would happen. There was the time a neighborhood child said they saw a boy in rubber boots walking along the edge of the woods. The parents dismissed it, kids have vivid imaginations, but Ashley couldn't sleep for 3 nights. Jason searched the area with a flashlight until his hands went numb. Nothing. Or the late-night call from a blocked number. A static voice whispering, "He's not where you think." Then nothing but a click. Even crueler were the moments that felt real. One evening, Ashley walked into the yard and saw a child standing at the corner of the street, same height, same frame. Her breath caught in her chest. She ran, yelling Dylan's name. But when she reached him, the boy turned. He wasn't Dylan. just a stranger's child out past bedtime. The couple began questioning everything. Not just the day he vanished, but the weeks before. The people they trusted. The neighbors they waved to. Jason recalled seeing a strange car parked near the house 2 days before the incident. At the time, it seemed harmless. But now, it gnawed at him. Could it have meant something? Had someone been watching? Ashley remembered a man who used to walk his dog past their yard every morning, until the day Dylan disappeared. She hadn't seen him since. No one else seemed to recall him either. When she asked around, people shrugged. Maybe he moved. But something about it felt wrong. These thoughts became obsessions. They both dove into the case themselves. Not trusting the search was over. Not trusting the story they'd been told. Jason mapped the stream's flow, marking every possible bend or split in the current. He traced where Dylan's boots were found, noting the distance between them. Something didn't add up. The brook wasn't wide enough, or fast enough, to have swept him away without a trace, not without more being found. Ashley turned to online groups, but not the ones that attacked them. She searched the quiet corners, places where other grieving parents shared leads, old cases, missing children. There were so many. Too many. A horrifying thread of disappearances that made Dylan's story feel less like an isolated tragedy, and more like a pattern. She noticed how often 3-year-old boys went missing near water. How police explanations defaulted to drowning even when bodies were never recovered. And she read stories, too many, of parents who swore their children didn't just wander off, but were taken. And just like that, their lives unraveled, one painful accusation at a time. It haunted her. The idea that something darker might be at work. Something hidden in plain sight. Something that watched from the edge of a playground or lingered by a stream until the right moment came. But what do you do when the world insists your worst nightmare is your own fault? They tried therapy. It helped, but only so much. Nothing can heal a wound that never closes. Every good day was followed by guilt, for laughing, for smiling, for living. And every bad day felt like proof they deserved this pain. Eventually, they stopped going out much. Friends stopped calling. The world had moved on. But they hadn't. They couldn't. Until one night, nearly 3 years after Dylan vanished, Jason got a message that froze him in place. A photo. Grainy. Blurry. But the boy in it. He looked just like Dylan. Older, yes. But the same eyes. Same shape of the face. Same cowlick on the right side of his head. The message simply read, "Saw this kid in New Brunswick. Thought of your case." Jason's hand shook as he showed Ashley. Her reaction was immediate, a gasp, then tears. She was certain. She was sure. They contacted the police. Sent the image. Begged for someone to investigate. Days passed. Then weeks. Finally, they got an answer. The boy in the photo had been identified. He lived with his parents, had never left town, had a completely different name. Case closed. But something about it still didn't sit right with Jason. He swore the boy had the same scar above the eyebrow Dylan got when he fell as a toddler. But there was nothing they could do. Just one more closed door in a hallway full of them. And yet, something in Jason refused to stop looking. Refused to stop believing that somewhere, somehow, his son was still alive. And if that's true, then someone knows. Someone saw. Someone heard something that day and said nothing. And maybe, just maybe, it's not too late to come forward. Not too late for justice. Not too late for Dylan. There are moments in life when the world goes quiet, not from peace, but from pressure. The kind of quiet that comes before something breaks. That's where Jason and Ashley now lived. Suspended in a silence that never left. The kind that creeps into every corner of a home and curls up in the cracks of your soul. It had been nearly 4 years since Dylan vanished. And still, no answers. No new clues. No new sightings. but the absence itself had begun to feel like a presence. Something constant. Heavy. Watching. Jason stopped working. He couldn't focus. Couldn't care. Every hour he wasn't searching felt like betrayal. He poured himself into forums, archives, water flow studies. He spent nights staring at maps, rewatching weather data from that day, measuring how far a toddler could realistically travel in 15 minutes. He memorized the sound of the brook. Played it over and over. Sometimes he thought he heard something different in the audio. A breath. A cry. A splash. But it was never clear. Ashley tried to keep structure, to cook, to clean, to survive. But her thoughts always circled back to the same question: was he calling for her that day? Did he cry out before he disappeared? Was he scared? That thought alone would wake her in the middle of the night, breathless, sitting upright, as if summoned by something she could no longer see. Then came the nightmares. In one, she walks down the stream, only to find Dylan's jacket hanging from a tree, soaking wet, still warm. In another, she's back in her mother's yard, and Dylan is sitting on the swing, smiling. But when she runs toward him, he turns, and his face is blank. Not scarred, not bleeding. Just featureless. Like he'd been erased. Jason had his own visions. More vivid. More violent. A figure standing at the water's edge, face obscured by fog. And in their arms, a child, limp, unmoving. Jason would scream in his sleep. Shatter glasses. Once he punched a hole clean through the wall near the kitchen sink. Ashley didn't ask what he saw. She didn't need to. The pressure mounted until it no longer fit inside the house. So they returned to the brook. It was early spring, the time of year when everything still feels raw and wet and uncertain. The trees hadn't bloomed yet. The air was sharp with the memory of winter. The stream trickled the same way it did the day Dylan vanished, as if nothing had changed. But everything had. Ashley knelt by the water and placed one of Dylan's old toys in the current. A red truck. She watched as it floated, slow at first, then caught by the pole, then spinning out of sight. Jason stood silently behind her, watching the water like it might give something back. And then she whispered, "If you're here, just give me a sign." The wind shifted. A soft breeze passed through the trees, just strong enough to knock a single leaf loose from a branch above. It fell and landed in the water, floating beside the truck. Ashley watched until both disappeared down the bend. That night, Ashley found something strange in the backyard. Near the edge of the fence, partially buried in the soft earth, a sock. Small. Faded. Dirty. Jason came out with a flashlight. They dug around it, uncovering nothing else. It wasn't Dylan's. At least, they didn't think so. But the design looked familiar. Red stripes. Cartoon dinosaur. A popular toddler brand from years earlier. Had someone placed it there? Was it a cruel joke? A mistake? A forgotten toy from another time? They bagged it anyway. Sent it to the police for testing. Weeks passed. No match. But the fear was back. The sense of being watched. Of something unfinished. Ashley began noticing odd things. The back gate left ajar in the morning. A trash bin turned slightly from where they left it. A van parked across the street for 2 days in a row, engine running, but no driver in sight. She wrote everything down. Kept logs. Times. Dates. License plates. One night, Jason came home and found Ashley sitting in the dark, clutching the baby monitor. It had powered on by itself. Static hissed through the speaker. Then, a faint sound. It was brief. Faint. A voice. A child's voice. "Mama." Jason lunged for it, adjusting the dials, holding his breath. Nothing. Just static. They searched the house. The yard. The monitor wasn't even plugged in. It hadn't worked in years. They both heard it. That was the worst part. They both heard it. The police said it was interference. That old monitors pick up radio signals sometimes. Could have been a neighbor's child, or a baby crying from a nearby apartment. Nothing unusual. But it wasn't a cry. It was a word. And it was his word. After that, Ashley wouldn't sleep with the lights off. Jason stayed up every night watching the monitor, waiting to hear the voice again. But it never came. Until one night, the screen flickered. A shadow moved across it. It wasn't a child. It wasn't anything they recognized. Just a dark blur. Close. Like it was inches from the lens. But Dylan's room had been empty for years. And the monitor wasn't even connected to anything. Jason turned it off. He couldn't explain it. Neither of them could. But something was changing. Something was circling closer. Not answers. Not peace. Something else. And in the silence of their grief, a new fear had begun to take root. What if the person who took Dylan never left? What if they were still watching? Still waiting? There's a point in every missing person case where grief stops being quiet. For Dylan Ehler's family, that moment came after the official explanation felt too final. The boots were found. But Dylan wasn't. And for Jason and Ashley, that wasn't closure, it was a puzzle with half the pieces missing. Search and rescue efforts began the very afternoon Dylan vanished. Emergency services were swift. Crews from across Nova Scotia were brought in. Drones, sonar, K9 units. Divers combed the river multiple times. The current was strong, the water cold. But despite the high-level response, Dylan's body was never recovered. 3-year-olds don't just vanish. They fall, they cry, they wander. But they leave signs. Footprints. Clothing. Something. The boots were the only trace, found in the brook, barely submerged. One 150 feet from the backyard. The other, just a little farther downstream. Both within the first day. Experts pointed to the water. Rapid, turbulent, and unforgiving, they said. A child could be swept away and lost quickly, even in water that appears shallow. It was a simple, terrible truth. But the absence of a body raised more questions than answers for many, including those closest to the case. Ashley and Jason didn't accept the drowning theory. Not fully. They believed in the science, in the danger of water, in the speed of accidents. But they also knew their son. Knew how fast he moved, what he feared, how far he could wander. And they knew that in just over 15 minutes, the only thing found were boots, neatly positioned, almost too conveniently placed. Behind closed doors, frustration grew. The Truro Police Department stood by its findings. No evidence of foul play. No signs of struggle. No indication of abduction. The case remained classified as a missing persons investigation, but without any criminal leads, it slowly shifted to a presumed drowning. Public scrutiny followed. Some questioned the search efforts. Others accused the family of not being honest. Online forums filled with theories. Facebook pages exploded with speculation. And soon, the grieving parents weren't just mourning the loss of their son, they were defending their roles in the story. Ashley in particular became a target. Her TikTok videos, posted before Dylan's disappearance, were dredged up and dissected. Clips taken out of context. Jokes twisted into accusations. Grief became public property. And the cruelty of strangers reached levels no parent should ever face. She took legal action against online defamation. Fought to clear her name. Fought to focus attention where it belonged, on her son. And still, nothing. No new leads. No surveillance footage from nearby homes. No eyewitnesses. No confirmed sightings. Every door they knocked on, every theory they followed, it all led to silence. But Jason and Ashley didn't stop. They turned to data. Water maps. Flow models. professional analysis of the brook and how a body might move through it. They consulted with hydrologists, engineers, and independent researchers. One study simulated the stream's current on that specific day, concluding that while the water was fast enough to carry a child, the lack of debris entanglement and the short stretch of unsearched shoreline left room for doubt. They organized independent searches, walked the woods, talked to neighbors, set up a Facebook group dedicated to finding Dylan. It wasn't just a support network, it became a timeline, a database, a record of every development, every conversation, every unanswered question. In 2022, 2 years after Dylan vanished, the family pushed for a legislative change, Dylan's Law. The goal was simple: to expand the use of Amber Alerts to include missing children in potentially dangerous non-criminal situations. They argued that waiting for a criminal suspicion delayed critical alerts. If Dylan's disappearance had triggered an immediate broadcast, perhaps more people in the area would have been watching. Perhaps someone would have seen him. The movement gained traction. Supporters rallied. Petitions spread. For a time, it felt like something good might grow out of the pain. But policy is slow. And for grieving parents, every day without answers stretches like a lifetime. The family's fight wasn't just against what happened that day. It was against the system, the silence, the pressure to accept the worst without knowing the truth. Jason said it best in one of his rare public statements. "We're not conspiracy theorists. We're not in denial. We just want answers. Real ones. Not theories." And yet, years passed. The public attention faded. Search efforts dwindled. But the ache didn't. And for Jason and Ashley, that ache took on a new shape. It wasn't just about where Dylan had gone. It was about what kind of world could let a child vanish, and then move on. Years passed differently for families of the missing. Time doesn't heal. It loops. Every spring becomes that spring. Every quiet moment becomes an echo of a moment lost. For Ashley and Jason, life after Dylan didn't return to normal, it simply rearranged around the void. The bedroom stayed untouched longer than it probably should have. The tiny socks stayed folded in drawers. Photos remained exactly where they'd been left. Not out of denial, but defiance. They refused to let Dylan become just a memory. Even without new developments, the family continued to speak Dylan's name at community events, in online campaigns, through interviews that reached both supporters and critics. Ashley never stopped sharing pictures. Never stopped hoping someone, somewhere, might recognize his face. Might recall a detail. Might speak up. And through the grief, something else took root. Purpose. They leaned fully into the campaign for Dylan's Law. They weren't just advocating for their son anymore, they were fighting for the safety of every missing child. They wanted Amber Alerts to be smarter, faster, broader. To trigger in cases like Dylan's where danger is clear, even if criminal intent isn't. In some ways, it gave shape to the helplessness. A direction to walk when every road backward was closed. There were moments of light. Letters arrived from strangers around the world, some from other grieving parents, others from people who had simply seen Dylan's smile online and felt the weight of it. "I don't know your pain," one letter read, "but I know what it means to love someone you can't reach." Then, on the 3rd anniversary of his disappearance, Ashley posted a video. Quiet. Just her voice. No music. No edits. "I still believe," she said. "I believe he's out there. Somewhere. I believe someone knows something. And I believe Dylan deserves more than a theory. He deserves truth." The comments flooded in. Some supportive. Some cruel. But Ashley didn't delete a single one. Because even hate meant people were still paying attention. And attention was something Dylan's case could no longer afford to lose. Not long after, the family launched a small foundation in Dylan's name, dedicated to helping families of the missing navigate media, legal resources, and trauma recovery. It was quiet work. Thankless. But for Jason and Ashley, it was a way to keep moving forward without letting go. Because letting go? That was never on the table. They visited the brook again last year. The water still ran cold. The trees still bent low. And near the spot where his boots had been found, someone had left a small stone painted with Dylan's name. Beneath it, in careful writing, "You are not forgotten." No one knows who left it. But it stayed. Just like the questions. Was it the water? A tragic accident no one could stop in time? Or was it something else? Something, or someone, that saw an opportunity in the silence between glances. The case remains open. There are no suspects. No official leads. Only a 3-year-old boy who vanished in plain sight. And a family left to carry the weight of that vanishing every single day. But they are still here. Still speaking. Still searching. Still loving a boy the world lost track of, but they never did. If you know anything about the disappearance of Dylan Ehler, no matter how small it may seem, contact Truro Police or Crime Stoppers. It only takes one detail to change everything. And if you're listening to this now, remember. Sometimes justice isn't loud. Sometimes it's a whisper. Waiting. The truth about Dylan's disappearance may never come to light. But one thing is certain, his story isn't over. It's still unfolding, and the answers are out there, waiting to be found. What do you think happened to Dylan Ehler? Do you believe it was an accident, or something more sinister? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation going. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe and join us for more true crime mysteries, dark truths, and unsolved horrors. Until next time, remember, the truth is often stranger and more terrifying than fiction.